Every time a new pour over dripper drops, I find myself asking the same question. And that is, do we actually even need this? You know, they're all kind of similar, cone shaped or flat bottom. You put a filter in it, you put coffee in the filter, you pour water in it, and coffee comes out the bottom. Like, what could any new dripper realistically bring to the table that's new at this point? And I do think the Melodrip Column brings something new to the table, actually, but let me answer that question simply and plainly. You do not need a Melodrip Column to brew great coffee at home. We'll talk about why that is, but also I have really enjoyed using this thing. Let's talk about why that is. The Melodrip Column is actually more of a pour-over system than it is just a dripper. It is made by Melodrip, who first kind of really became known for this little device called a Melodrip. And what this is when you pour water over it, it will kind of distribute it in this nice little shower underneath here. You can do lower agitation pour over with it. Really cool. The column is really interesting. The mini dripper itself, this part, really takes its notes from a V60. It's a conical shape. The V60 is a bit of an industry standard, and conical drippers overall tend to have a very crisp, acidity forward taste profile. The V60 though also suffers from something called bypass. And that means when you fill it up with water, some of the water is going to go directly through the coffee bed, which is a good thing, but some is also going to escape out the sides above the main coffee bed and kind of bypass around the majority of your coffee grounds. Some brewers have tried to solve this by creating what's called a no bypass design, where all of the water is forced to go through that coffee bed. The Next Level Pulsar do this, and even some flat bottom drippers like the Aurea, you can get special filters and thing called a negotiator to kind of flatten the filter around the sides, so that can't really happen. No bypass drippers tend to create higher extraction brews, and flat bottom drippers in particular tend to be a little bit more sweetness and body forward than many conical drippers. And the column really combines the best of some of both of those worlds. You know, it's going to give you a very acidity, clarity forward brew with a lot of that bigness and intensity of no bypass brewers. And the resulting cups are very good. Acidity forward, lots of flavor separation, high extraction, big presence in the cup, really nice brews. But there are a couple twists in how it actually works. And the first is obviously the number of pieces. First, you have the mini dripper here, which looks a lot like other conical drippers, just in a smaller version. The inside looks kind of like a Kono actually, with these ribs down in the bottom part and a flat part up here. It's made out of stainless steel. There also is this filter ring that kind of sits in the mini dripper. And on the filter ring, there's this ledge that goes around, and that is where the glass column sits on top of. And it also comes with this little glass stir stick. All of the components are glass or metal. It's all made in Taiwan in partnership with a second generation manufacturing partner there. Really small scale operation, really. Manufacturing and labor standards in Taiwan are very good. That's fantastic. But there are a lot of components and pieces to using the column. And right off the bat, some people are going to look at all this and say, that's all too much hassle. I don't want to be bothering with all of that business when I can just get a normal pour over dripper. It's one piece and be done. And that is totally fair. Stick with me though, while we make a coffee for a minute. I have 17 grams here of a Columbia Gesha coffee. It's roasted by the Angry Roaster, and it's called Fruit Loops because it smells kind of like Fruit Loops. And I'm gonna grind it up here with my Easy Presso ZP6. Now, before we get started here, a little something about me. I am a bit of a by the numbers, very precise, deep dive type coffee brewer, which can be fantastic for experimentation and consistency. You follow a very specific recipe, usually by volume and to the milliliter, to the second, and you come out with a certain brew. And you can brew that way with the column as well. There are a lot of recipes out there, but I'm going to do something a little different here. I'm going to break that little rule that I have. Now, the column works in a pretty interesting way. It uses this glass column right here and the height of the water inside to control the flow rate using something called hydrostatic pressure. Basically, what that means is that the higher the water level in the column here, the more pressure there is at the bottom and the faster the water is going to flow out the other side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out that by the numbers philosophy that I would normally do, and I'm going to brew basically just using a couple key numbers and watching that water level in there. First though, I need to seat and pre-wet my filter. Now, the column uses these mini filters. Everything is mini, kind of cute. That come with it, and they're pretty interesting little tiny filters compared to other filters for other drippers that are quite a bit larger. And it's recommended to fold these mini filters so that the fold starts down at this corner here and goes up to in between this little notch right here and the edge. So I'm going to do that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the filter into the mini dripper. And I'm just going to put that little stick in there to kind of hold it down in there. And then I'm going to pre-wet it with water that is just off boil. You should see the filter evenly contacting those ribs down in the bottom. Now I'm going to put this column on the filter ring, and I'm just going to shift it very slightly forward and back and side to side to kind of seal that filter on that ledge with the glass column. I'm going to put my coffee in here, and then I'm going to bloom the coffee for 60 seconds in my case. You do you, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do a 50-gram bloom for my 17 grams of coffee. And then I'm just going to poke around with this little stick, not too crazy, but just breaking up any clumps that may not have gotten hit with the water. Then I'm going to let that sit for a full minute. Now, once that minute is up, rather than pouring to very specific weights or anything like that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Melodrip and I'm going to pour over it, creating a nice even shower. And I'm just going to raise the water level right up to the level 2. Not really paying attention to how much that was by weight, just kind of feeling it out. And I'm going to wait until the water level falls down to a point that's roughly halfway between the 1 and the 2. And then I'm going to repeat that process. And then I'm just going to keep doing that until I get to my target weight of about 290 mil. Very low agitation. All of the water is being forced down through that bed of coffee. I'm using very hot water here. Part of that is because it's getting dispersed a lot, so a little bit more opportunity to lose some heat through that process. It's a very lightly roasted coffee as well. And when I'm all done, I'm just going to give this column a little twist to get any grounds off it. And I usually put it upside down so that anything's kind of hanging up on the bottom there doesn't go onto my counter. And then the filter ring, I really like this, just kind of pops out to make it a little bit easier to dispose of your filter. And we'll see how this tastes. That is a really nice cup. Really nuanced, big presence. Very structured, dense, but with a lot of flavor separation. It is very Fruit Loopsy, but I do get pronounced lime on it. Very nice cup of coffee. All right, now a couple things that I really like about the column. Number one is that taste profile. I really like that big intensity in the cup without losing the nuance and flavor separation that I could normally expect from a conical brewer. Second thing, I love how the column can pull me out of that paying attention to every little number mode that I very often find myself brewing in, and I can just surf a brew very, very organically. It's a nice experience for somebody like me who gets wrapped up in all of that detail when sometimes you're looking for something that is a little bit more relaxed without sacrificing a result. Just a nice unplug there. The materials I really like too, you know, the glass and metal combination. The only thing that I wish for, holding out hope for one day, is a Melodrip that's not got this bottom part made out of plastic. But as far as the column itself goes, love the materials. Anybody trying to minimize plastic, this checks that box. And also the fun factor. You know, I recently did a video on the 5 pillars that make a great pour over dripper, and one of those pillars is fun. And this dripper is just off the charts fun to use. It's fun to look at, sitting there, you pull it off the shelf and people are like, ooh, what is that? That looks so cool. And I think it looks cool too. And beyond that, just using it, you feel like you're a little bit of a mad scientist using it because it's got this kind of like beaker look. Very neat, very fun to use. A lot of little bits to do that are very enjoyable on the whole if you like that kind of thing. You know, before you actually use it, it's easy to look at and think, oh, you know, that's going to be way too much fussing about. And I even kind of thought that. But then once you do it a couple times, the process, it's just pretty enjoyable, at least for me anyway. And I also really love the spirit of it. You know, the guy that owns Melodrip is a guy named Ray. Great follow on social media, by the way. And Ray just embodies this openness and curiosity when it comes to brewing. You know, it's not like there's one right way to use the Melodrip Column. It really is designed for you to experiment and find the way that you want to brew with it. He posted this story that I just loved, and he says, every time I create a rule, I remind myself to do the opposite every now and then. I just think the hyper-focused, hyper-detailed, data-seeking world of coffee enthusiasts could use a little bit more of that on the whole. I'm a fan of Ray. I love his posture in this regard, and I think it really comes through in the column. Now, the shadow side of that is that there are a lot of ways to brew with the column, and even when you first get it, you get this recipe card that has all these recipes for different doses. You go online, there are a million other recipes, even just posted on the Melodrip website for the column, and it seems really complicated, and you can make it very complicated. And that's part of the fun of it, is like nerding out and trying to figure out what you like and what you don't like and all of that. But if I'm being honest, when I first opened this thing, it sat on the shelf for a while for that reason, because I thought, wow, this is more complicated than maybe I thought. And I feel like I need to do a bit of a deep dive before just jumping in and trying to brew with this thing. And it was only after that I actually started brewing with it and I realized that you can also approach it in a super organic, just kind of going with the flow vibe and come out with an absolutely great result, that I realized I had kind of gotten hung up on that. And once I actually just started using it, all of that complication, all that just kind of melted away. Now, a couple of cons and considerations that you may want to think about if you are thinking that you may want to go in this direction. Again, if this feels like this is just way too much fuss for you, it may very well be, and that's okay. For anybody who's just casually getting into pour over, I always recommend get yourself a plastic basic V60, good coffee, good water, good grinder. You're going to be good. If you want to mess around more and kind of deep dive into this whole world, this is a really fun way to do it, but you definitely don't need to in order to have good coffee. Now, if you do happen to be really passionate about just you love brewing pour over, this is actually designed for you. The flip side of that though is because not everybody is into that. They're made in smaller numbers, lower volumes, which do push that cost up. I bought the column on the recommendation of a friend. It was a great recommendation. I'm in Canada, so I bought in Canadian dollars. Adjusting for US dollars, it came in at about $90 US. Shipping was about $25 US. And then border fees, there wasn't actually duty, but there were some import charges, came in at another $25 US. Now, I bought it with the Melodrip, so that was part of it, but it's a lot more expensive than a V60 that you can get on Amazon for $15, that's for sure. Couple other considerations. The filters are proprietary. They're a smaller size, a little bit of a different shape. They work fantastic, but they're made by Melodrip. You can't just buy them wherever. At this point, you have to buy them direct or through a very small number of retail partners. So again, you're gonna end up shipping them likely, a little bit more expensive. I do think that proprietary filters can be great. These flow great, but it's a bit of a trade-off. One thing that I would love to see is wider availability, maybe a Canadian partner for these at some point in the future. You can hack other filters to work in the column just by, cutting them or whatever. But that is kind of going against the ethos of, smaller filters, less paper waste, all that kind of thing. A couple other small things to consider with the column. If you're using a high fines grinder, like a grinder that creates a lot of little fine particles, I'm using a EasyPresso ZP6 here, which is relatively low fines. Anything higher fines combined with high agitation, like if you're doing a straight bare kettle pour, can stall the column. I really like the low agitation brews with the Melodrip. Kind of comes down to personal brewing style and what grinder you're using there. Overall though, I just really like using this thing. I love reviewing gear that I just really like. I bought the column. I definitely wasn't expecting to like it as much as I ended up liking it. I thought it would be cool, but once I started using it, I just kind of got sucked in, and I just really like using this dripper. Do I use it when I want, a critical side-by-side with other drippers? Not really. Do I use it when I'm trying to get a V60 profile? Not really. Do I use it when I just want to brew with no strings attached for my own enjoyment? Absolutely. I really like using it. So that was a fun surprise. On the other hand, I recognize that it's a little bit extra in some ways. I like the flexibility it offers. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. You can brew organically. You can do different recipes that different people have created. Everybody seems to have a different way of brewing with this. You can use it without the column at all. If you just want to do a low dose, you can just put a filter in here and just brew with this thing. That's pretty cool. You can use the column actually on other pour over drippers. You can try it on a V60 or whatever. There's a lot of flexibility, a lot of room for experimentation. I really like how that posture and that philosophy is kind of baked into this thing. And to top it off, the cups, they really suit me, and I really like that high clarity, high extraction, big intensity in the cup. It's really good. So those are my thoughts on the column. I would love to hear what you think about the column. Do let me know in the comments. If you're an owner, I would especially love to hear from you. I find that owners of products bring very special insights, so make sure to drop yours down there in the comments. I hope your next cup of coffee is fantastic, and we'll see you next time.